On September 9, 1980, the massive cargo ship named MV Derbyshire was sailing through the rough waters of the Pacific Ocean when it encountered the wrath of Typhoon Orchid. The Category 3 storm caused waves as high as 40 feet and winds that gusted up to 125 miles per hour. And so when contact was lost with the vessel, authorities knew they were in for a grim task. What could have caused such a large, modern ship to sink in such calm waters? Was it a storm like Typhoon Orchid that was powerful enough to take down even planes? What happened to the 44 men on board? Was there any warning before the sinking? And what does the word of the survivors tell us about the final moments of the ship? Join me as we unravel the mystery of the sinking. No one could explain in today's episode. It was September 2, 1980, and after 56 days at sea, the MV Derbyshire was only a few days away from completing its long journey. It had left Saldanha Bay in Canada, laden with 150,000 tons of iron ore, and was heading to Japan, where it would be unloaded and then be filled with a cargo of coal to be shipped to Europe. The trip had been a long one, and for the 44 crew members, many of whom had been at sea for months, the end was in sight. Among them was Captain Geoffrey Underhill, who was looking forward to being reunited with his wife in Japan. Underhill was an experienced mariner, having spent over 20 years sailing the seas. He had sailed for a number of different shipping companies, and had extensive knowledge of maritime safety procedures. As captain of the Derbyshire, he was responsible for the safety and navigation of the ship and its cargo, as well as the welfare of the crew. Now the Derbyshire was a new class of ship, known as an ore bulk oil carrier. These ships were designed to transport large quantities of dry bulk cargo such as iron ore, coal and grain, as well as liquid cargoes like oil. They were also known as mini ore carriers, because of their smaller size compared to other bulk carriers. However, these ships were still massive, measuring 759 feet in length and 141 feet wide. They were also equipped with advanced technology, including a computer-assisted navigation system, radar, and an autopilot. The idea behind these ships was to create a vessel that could transport a variety of goods, allowing shipping companies to maximize their revenue. But despite their advanced technology and design, the Derbyshire and other oboe ships were known to be susceptible to a phenomenon known as pitching. This occurs when a ship moves up and down in a repetitive motion as it encounters waves, which can cause instability and make the ship difficult to control. Despite this, the Derbyshire was considered a safe and reliable vessel, and its crew were confident in its ability to handle the rough seas of the Pacific Ocean. As the ship approached Japan, the crew began preparing for unloading. They checked the cargo holds to ensure everything was in order, and they started shutting down the ship's engines. The plan was to arrive in Japan on September 6th, but due to bad weather, they were delayed and the ship did not reach port until 2 days later. On September 8th, as the crew prepared to drop anchor, they contacted the Japanese Coast Guard to let them know of their arrival and to ask for permission to enter the port. The Coast Guard responded that, due to the approaching typhoon, they should wait for the storm to pass before attempting to dock. But the captain decided to risk it and ordered the ship to proceed to the port. Now, while the captain was making this decision, a lookout was stationed at the top of the ship to keep an eye out for other vessels. At around 10:30 p.m., the lookout spotted a tanker named Crimson Polaris, about 300 meters ahead of them. To avoid a collision, the captain ordered the ship to turn to starboard, or the right side, to pass the tanker. As the Derbyshire began to turn, the crew on board felt a sudden jolt. Some have described it as the feeling of the ship hitting a submerged object. Others say it was as if they had run bottom first into a wave. Whatever the case may have been, this incident marked the last time anyone saw the ship alive. As the night wore on, the storm grew stronger, causing waves as high as 40 feet and winds that gusted up to 125 miles per hour. At some point during the night, the captain contacted the Coast Guard to let them know that the ship had lost power and was drifting dangerously off course. He requested assistance, but it was too late. The ship was already in grave danger. In the morning, the Crimson Polaris, the tanker that had been spotted by the lookouts on the Derbyshire, reported that it had collided with something in the water, but it had not stopped to investigate. It continued on its journey to Japan, unaware of the disaster that had just unfolded. When the storm finally subsided, the Crimson Polaris returned to the area to see if it had hit another ship, but there was no sign of the Derbyshire or its crew. All that was found was an abandoned lifeboat, and for lifebuoys, The lifebuoys were immediately taken off the boat and brought back to shore. It soon became apparent that they had been on the lifeboat for several days and were suffering from severe exposure. They were given medical attention, and one of them, a young man named Kenji Hashimoto, was flown to a hospital in Manila in the Philippines for further treatment. The others were sent to a hospital in Kobe, Japan. They were the only survivors of the Derbyshire disaster. An investigation was launched to determine what had happened to the ship. The 4 survivors were interviewed, and they told the investigators that the ship had started to list to one side, and that they had put on life jackets and abandoned ship before it sank. They also said that the ship had not been taking on water before it capsized, contradicting earlier reports that the ship may have been overloaded or that its cargo had shifted, causing it to become unstable. Despite the investigation, the cause of the sinking remained a mystery. There was no evidence of foul play, mechanical failure, or human error, and the fact that the ship had been reported as missing and not overdue puzzled investigators. The ship's route took it directly across the path of Typhoon Orchid, one of the most powerful typhoons ever recorded in the region, with wind speeds reaching up to 125 miles per hour and waves as high as 40 feet. The typhoon was a force to be reckoned with. However, the typhoon had passed by the time the Derbyshire encountered trouble, leaving behind clear skies and calm seas. In fact, the weather conditions were so good that the captain had decided to press on to Japan instead of waiting for the storm to pass. This was a risky move, but it was not unheard of for experienced captains to do this. After all, the Derbyshire was a modern, well-built ship that was designed to withstand rough seas. As the investigation dragged on, rumors began to spread about what really happened to the Derbyshire. Some people believed that the ship had been overloaded with cargo and that this caused it to become unstable and eventually capsize. Others believed that the crew had made a mistake while loading the cargo, which caused it to shift and make the ship unmanageable. There was even speculation that the ship had been sabotaged, but as more evidence came to light, it became clear that none of these theories were correct. The ship had not been overloaded, and there was no evidence of sabotage, and the crew had followed proper procedures for loading the cargo. So why did the Derbyshire sink? To this day, no one is sure what caused the MV Derbyshire to sink. It was a well-built ship that was designed to withstand rough seas, and it was being sailed by an experienced crew. There was no indication that there was any problems with the ship prior to the incident. What makes this case particularly puzzling is the fact that similar ships are known to pitch, but this causes instability and makes the ship difficult to control. This could have potentially played a role in the sinking of the Derbyshire, but it doesn't explain why the ship suddenly capsized and sank. One possible explanation is that the ship may have struck an object in the water that caused it to become unstable. This could have been a container that had fallen off another ship or a piece of debris that had been left in the ocean. However, there is no evidence to support this theory, and it is highly unlikely that such a large ship would have been unable to navigate around an object in the water. Another possibility is that the ship may have been caught in a rogue wave. Rogue waves are massive waves that can occur unexpectedly in the ocean, even in areas where the weather is relatively calm. While it is rare for rogue waves to cause ships to sink, they can certainly cause damage and instability. However, there is no evidence that a rogue wave was responsible for the sinking of the Derbyshire, and it is unclear whether a rogue wave would have been able to capsize such a large ship. Ultimately, the cause of the sinking remains unknown, and the mystery continues to baffle experts and researchers alike. The loss of the Derbyshire and its crew was a tragedy that could have been avoided. With better communication and coordination, the captain may have been able to wait out the storm and avoid the fate that ultimately befell him and his crew. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.